right, here is a short review. It's not a substitute for studying your notes and also your book, but at this time, I think only reading your notes will be effective. And if you have time, of course, read the textbook as well. All right, so the exam will include chapter 2, then not 3, chapter 4, and then the chapter 5 and 6 on GDP and CPI or inflation in general. Okay, so let me start with chapter 2. In chapter 2, we talked about models. So models are a simplification of the real world, which help us to understand economic phenomena. And models have their own objectives, assumptions, and limitations. So each model has objective, so you have to understand what its objective is, or whenever you are asked a question about a given economic phenomena to analyze, you have to find the model that explains that question well. All right, then we started with a simple model of production possibility frontier. Production possibility frontier is a model that tries to explain the trade-off that is involved in an economy or in a firm, for that matter. And if this is good Y, this is good X, basically we have a downward sloping production possibility frontier. Now it can be a straight line, or it can be bowed outward. That's not really the point. The downward sloping thing is more important. And here, you can explain with the production possibility frontier the trade-off that is involved in producing the two goods. So any point on the production possibility frontier, like A, B, C, are all efficient because you cannot produce more of one good without giving up the other. There's a trade-off. But points like point D, which are inside the production possibility frontier, will be inefficient, or are inefficient actually. And then points like point E are what we call unattainable or not feasible at this given time, but over time, due to technological progress or due to more resources, it can be attained. Now, one of the things that we used the production possibility frontier for is to determine, compare two people or two countries to determine which one has, absolute advantage and which one has lower opportunity cost of producing things, which we call comparative advantage. So that's basically it on this. And then we talked about the circular flow diagram. Let me see if I have a picture on that. The production possibility frontier we have seen. This is a circular flow diagram which explains the flow of resources and payments from households to firms, or from firms to households, through the two markets we have: the market for goods and services and the market for factors of production. So here the red loop shows how resources like labor, land, capital are rented or sold to firms as factors of production, and how firms transform them to goods and services and sell them through the market for goods and services to households. And on the opposite loop, the green one, we have payment of resources. So when firms rent resources from households, they pay wages, rent, profit. which gives you actually in chapters 5. This is GDP, and then it's income for the households, and households spend this income in total, because we assume that everything is spent, there is no saving and investment, and therefore the spending, which is also GDP, goes to firms as revenue, and that is also GDP, or income of the economy. So that's basically the idea of the circular flow diagram. And then we looked at the demand and supply, which is probably one of the most important models in economics. Supply and demand, or demand and supply. And here we have to understand the law of demand and the law of supply. The law of demand gives us the downward sloping demand curve, but remember here, price is the internal independent variable which determines the quantity demanded of a good. So we put price on the vertical axis and quantity on the horizontal axis, which is opposite what mathematicians do. They put the independent variable in the horizontal axis. But it's an issue of convention, so we put it like this. And basically, even though we can have a vertical demand curve, usually, the normal one is a downward sloping demand curve. But an upward sloping demand curve is a violation of the law of demand, basically. Similarly, we have law of supply, which implies that the supply curve is non-decreasing. Non-decreasing means that it can be an increasing one, it can be also vertical, that's okay, but usually we go with the upward sloping one. And if you basically relate these two, we'll go to the concept of equilibrium. But here, while we are here, I want to emphasize the importance of change in demand and change in quantity demand. So change in demand refers to, in economics, as a movement along the curve, and it's caused only by change in the price of the good. Now when prices change, the curve doesn't shift, or for example, when prices go down, the curve doesn't shift like to the right, like increase in demand. There is only increase in quantity demanded as we move from P1 to P2, Q1 to Q2. Now remember, when price go down, buyers buy more of the good, other things being equal, but they don't need to shift their demand curve. They just move along the same demand curve. On the other hand, movement from point A to point C is called change in demand. That is increase in demand, because in here, for the same price, now buyers are buying more of the good from Q1, let's say, to Q3. This is what we call change in demand or increase in demand, particularly in here. And it's caused by the shift factors, all factors that may affect buyers' behavior other than the price of the good. Okay, we have here, remember, you have to remember this. The other factors, the price of the goods, income of consumers, expectations on future income and future price of the good, and so on and so forth. And then we have the same principles also for supply. Change in quantity supplied refers to movement along the same supply curve from A to B, and it's caused by price changes from P1 to P2, for example. But changes like from A to C, is called change in supply. In this particular case, it is an increase in supply. The entire curve is shifting, and it's caused by other factors like decrease in input prices, technological progress, expectation of sellers that the price will go up, down rather, in the future, therefore they buy more today, and so on and so forth. Yeah, so those are the shift factors and movement along the curve. And then we talked about equilibrium points and change in equilibrium points. So if you bring in the supply and demand together, we can explain what happens in the market, in specific market, market for oranges, for example, in here. Okay, so most of the time we are interested in economics, how the market goes from one equilibrium to another equilibrium. So we don't care actually where the price is. It can be any price, P1, let's say, but what we are interested in is in the directional change in the price of the good. Okay, so any change in the demand or supply, which is a shift of the curve, cause equilibrium price and quantity to change. And remembering the shift factors will be handy to explain these things easily. Now, in the exam, you will be asked a couple of questions like, what happens if a shift factor occurs? Can you predict the increase, the price, whether it's going to increase or decrease or remain the same? The same thing with the quantity. Okay, so here I'm not gonna go in detail, but for example, if demand goes up, the equilibrium point goes from A to B. That's what we observe after everything is said and done. The market settles at point B, and what we will see is higher price of the good and higher quantity of the good as well. But when it is the supply that changes, let's say from point A, if we are starting from point A and the supply decreases from S1 to S2, we move from A to point C, and this results in quantity going down actually from Q1 to Q2 prime, but price also goes up from P1 to P2. Okay, now if both of this happen, as you can see it, what happens is that we end up actually at this point D. Okay, so quantity remains the same for this particular example, but price still goes up to P3. But what happens when we don't know the size of the shift of the curve is that we basically say ambiguous whenever the quantity is gonna be like in here to stay the same. It means that it could have also gone up or down depending on which shift is greater. If supply shift is greater, actually quantity will go down. If the increase in demand is greater, then quantity would go up. So the term we use for such cases is the word ambiguous or indeterminate. Okay, so let me stop the video in here for the first part, and then we'll continue on GDP and CPI in the next video.